Hello and welcome to Star Z Life, the channel where you can find out everything about the lives of your favorite stars. In this video, we explore the tragic life and death of Louis de Funès, one of France's most beloved comedic actors. Known for his explosive energy, expressive face, and impeccable sense of timing, de Funès became a household name in French cinema during the 1960s and 1970s. He shone in classics like The Adventures of Rabbi Jacob and The Gendarme of Saint-Tropez series. His sharp wit and burlesque humor captivated millions of viewers worldwide. But behind the laughter and hilarious antics, his personal life was marked by financial struggles, family dramas, and devastating health issues. As Louis de Funès once said, "Laughter is the shortest distance between two people." He dedicated his life to bringing joy to millions, but his own life was far from a smooth journey. If you love learning about the lives of iconic figures like de Funès, don't forget to hit the like button and subscribe to our channel for more in-depth stories about your favorite stars. Let's dive into this fascinating and often lesser-known biography. Let's start with his difficult childhood, which deeply shaped his comedic genius. Louis Germain David de Funès de Galarza, his full name, was born on July 31, 1914, in Courbevoie, in the Hauts-de-Seine near Paris. His parents, Carlos Luis de Funès de Galarza and Leonor Soto Reguera, were Spanish immigrants. Carlos hailed from Seville and came from a noble family with ties to the Counts of Galarza, a Basque lineage. Leonor, on the other hand, came from a wealthy family in Galicia, with Portuguese roots. Their love story was romantic but tumultuous. They fled Spain in 1904 to marry in France, defying their families who disapproved of their union. Picture the scene. A young civilian lawyer elopes with his fiancée, the daughter of a Galician notary, and they cross the border to start a new life in Paris. But reality was far less idyllic. In France, Carlos, once a respected lawyer, could not practice his profession and retrained as a diamond cutter. Initially, this provided some stability for the family, which grew with the birth of Marie, nicknamed Mine, in 1908, Charles in 1911, and finally Louis in 1914. However, Carlos, ambitious and dreamy, embarked on a series of extravagant but unsuccessful entrepreneurial ventures to rebuild his lost fortune. He tried to market quirky inventions, like a process for coloring ostrich feathers or innovative jewelry, but these projects drained the family's resources. Financial ruin struck, and in 1927, after a resounding bankruptcy, they had to move to a modest apartment in Montmartre. According to biographers, Carlos, overwhelmed by shame and despair, staged his own death in 1932. He left his shoes, hat, and a farewell note near a canal in Paris, making it seem like a suicide. In reality, he fled to Venezuela in a final attempt to restore his wealth. Tragically, instead of riches, he contracted tuberculosis and died alone in 1934, far from his family in Spain, where he had quietly returned. This abandonment left Leonor in a desperate situation. Once a woman of high status in Spain, she found herself widowed, raising 3 children alone in a small apartment in a working-class neighborhood of Courbevoie. The financial struggles were crushing. There were no social welfare programs at the time, no safety net. Leonor, endowed with a fiery temperament and fierce pride, fought tooth and nail to provide for her family. She went to local shops, fiercely negotiating credit, sometimes shouting at store owners to secure food or clothing. These public scenes deeply embarrassed young Louis, who often hid to avoid the shame. Director Georges Lautner, who knew Leonor well, described her as an explosive woman. She shouted, stomped her feet, chased people in an uncontrollable rage. These traits, theatrical anger, exaggerated gestures, would later become iconic signatures of Louis de Funès' comedic roles. Lautner even said, "The comedian de Funès, the character of de Funès, is his mother." Indeed, we see in films like The Mad Adventures of Rabbi Jacob or The Tattoo these bursts of burlesque fury that seem directly inspired by Leonor. Louis's childhood was thus marked by poverty and instability. The family lived in a world where financial insecurity was a constant companion. Louis adored his mother but struggled with the shame of their circumstances. At the center school in Villiers-sur-Marne, where he spent his early years, he was a frail child, often mocked for his small stature, he stood barely 5 feet 4 inches as an adult. Then, at age 10, he was sent to a boarding school at the Jules Ferry College in Colomiers, a strict institution where he suffered from bullying by other students. To survive, he developed a coping mechanism: humor. Instead of succumbing to despair, Louis channeled his discomfort into jokes and imitations. His biographer Bertrand Tessier notes, rather than letting himself be crushed, Louis learned to make others laugh to navigate the challenges of his youth. At 12, in 1926, he took his first steps on stage in a local comic opera, Le Royal Dindon, at the Municipal Theatre of Colomiers, where he acted and sang, earning praise in the local press for his precocious talent. Despite these flashes of artistic brilliance, Louis struggled academically. At the prestigious Lycée Condorcet in Paris, his grades were mediocre. He had trouble focusing, preferring to draw or play the piano. Labeled an average student, he dropped out at 16 without a diploma and turned to manual trades. On his brother Charles's advice, who worked in the fur trade, he enrolled at the professional fur school but was expelled for excessive disruption. Then, in 1932, he joined the Technical School of Photography and Cinema, ETPC, where he met Henri Deci, a future cinematographer on several of his films. But once again, he was expelled after starting a fire during a prank. Years of intermittent unemployment and odd jobs followed: accountant, window dresser, decorator, salesman. Louis was often fired for his lack of discipline or seriousness, but these experiences forged his resilient character. As a teenager, Louis realized he had a gift for entertaining others. Multilingual, fluent in French, Spanish, and English, he was talented in drawing and music, which provided solace amid family struggles. Affectionately nicknamed Fufu by close friends, he found work as a bar pianist in the lively, smoky clubs of Pigalle, Paris' vibrant nightlife district. It was there, in the 1930s, that he began experimenting with physical comedy. While playing jazz on the piano, he made faces and exaggerated gestures, trying to amuse the staff and patrons. His first audience was small, often just a few amused waiters, but it gave him a taste of the comedic potential he would later unleash on the big screen. Music producer Eddie Barclay, whom he met during this time, recalled, "Louis couldn't read music, but he had an excellent ear and was an extraordinary musician." He never mentioned his dream of becoming an actor back then. In 1936, at 22, Louis took a decisive step toward theater by enrolling in the prestigious Simon Acting School. He studied there for a year, despite his small stature, prematurely balding head, and unconventional appearance, which didn't suggest a future star. Yet, his unique talent for physical comedy and quick wit caught attention. At the school, he met actors like Daniel Jellin, who would become valuable contacts. Jellin later shared a humorous anecdote: "Every time we met for a new film, Louis would recall chemical formulas we learned 20 or 30 years earlier at school, like sodium hyposulfite, while mimicking our strict teacher. It was like a bond between us." Unfortunately, Louis was expelled from the school after an incident involving arson, a prank gone wrong. This marked the start of a cycle of unemployment and short-lived jobs, from which he was constantly fired for his mischievous behavior. His son Olivier de Funès reflected on this period in his memoirs. "After dropping out of high school, my father took all sorts of odd jobs. Sometimes I wonder if he embellished his stories in interviews because he never talked about them at home." For years, Louis struggled to break into the film industry. Convinced that his small stature and unusual appearance made him unfit for leading roles, he continued working as a pianist in clubs while taking small, often uncredited roles in films and theater productions. It wasn't until the 1950s that he began gaining recognition in theater, with performances that earned him moderate success. But before that, World War II disrupted his life. When World War II broke out in September 1939, Louis de Funès, then 25, was called up for mobilization. However, 5 years earlier, at 20, he had been declared unfit for active duty due to his small frame, 5 feet 5 inches and 119 pounds, and a family history of tuberculosis, particularly his father's death. Repeated examinations confirmed this unfitness, and he was deemed suitable only for passive service. Nevertheless, he was temporarily assigned to non-combat tasks, handling earthworks, and moving from one barracks to another before being stationed near the Marne during the Funès War, a period of tension without major fighting. To boost troop morale, Louis organized small performances, brilliantly imitating stars like Maurice Chevalier. His fellow soldiers remembered his improvised sketches, which foreshadowed his comedic style. In April 1940, Louis fell ill and was summoned before a medical board. He was diagnosed with suspected tuberculosis, a mistake, as he never actually had it. Discharged, he escaped combat, but for the rest of his life, he believed this exemption was due to a mix-up in his medical records. Tragedy struck the family when his brother Charles, mobilized in the 152nd Infantry Regiment, was killed during the German offensive in May 1940, shot by enemy fire at Sault-les-Rethel. Louis became the legal guardian of his orphaned nephew Edouard, but the child was primarily raised by his Aunt Marie, as Louis was penniless at the time. For nearly 40 years, Louis fought to have his brother buried in a military cemetery. He succeeded in 1976, with the burial at the Rethel National Necropolis. Exempt from military service, Louis navigated a series of odd jobs during the German occupation. He worked as a glazier, shoe shiner, floor scraper, and even window dresser. Eventually, he found more stability as a bar pianist. It was during this period that he met Eddie Barclay, who recalled, "Louis, like me, couldn't read music, but he had an excellent ear and was an extraordinary musician." Louis played in various venues, often working 12-hour shifts for minimal pay, sometimes just a cup of coffee. Georges Lautner saw him perform in 1942 at La Madeleine, a bistro in Bagatelle. Louis played the piano with great skill, but when he had the stage to himself, he'd jump on the piano and start singing. This ability to blend humor and musical performance would later become a hallmark of his acting style, as seen in films like The Grand Restaurant or The Sucker, where he improvises comedic musical scenes. In the early 1940s, Louis joined his friend Eddie Barclay to enroll in the new International Jazz Conservatory in Paris, led by Professor Charles Henry. There, he met Jean Barthélemy, the director's secretary, who would become his second wife. This period also allowed him to cross paths with future stars like Raymond Legrand, Robert Derry, and Albert Reisner, as well as other key figures in the French jazz scene. In 1942, at 28, Louis decided to pursue his dream of becoming an actor. He enrolled in the Simon acting course and passed the entrance exam with a performance from Molière's The Tricks of Scapin. Though his time there was brief, he was expelled for indiscipline. It was pivotal. It was there that he solidified his friendship with Daniel Jellin, who would later give him his first significant acting opportunity. Jellin recounted, "I was getting out of a first-class metro car, and Daniel, whom I'd met at the Simon course, was getting into a second-class car. Just as the door was closing, he shouted, 'Call me tomorrow, I have a small role for you.'" Jellin's mentorship was a lifeline during tough years. In addition to small theater roles, Louis kept ends meeting by working as a jazz pianist, giving lessons by day and playing in clubs at night. In 1944, during the occupation, he narrowly escaped forced labor in Germany, STO, thanks to his concierge's quick thinking, who told German authorities he had left town the day before. In 1945, with Jellin's help, Louis made his film debut at 31 in Jean Stelly's The Temptation of Barbizon. In the small role of a porter at the Le Paradis Cabaret, he delivered his first on-screen line with perfect comedic timing. Seeing a customer struggle with a door, he quipped, "Well, he got his money's worth today." This marked the start of his film career, though for years he was relegated to small roles, often playing multiple characters in a single film, as in Du Guesclin in 1948. The 1950s were marked by ups and downs. Louis de Funès' career was a relentless effort against persistent struggles. He played small roles in Sacha Guitry's films, showing flashes of his comedic potential but remaining largely unknown. In 1952, he joined Robert Derry's Branquignol's troupe, taking multiple jobs to make ends meet. His son Olivier recalled, "My father juggled performances at different venues, running from one gig to another." Though he worked alongside stars like Jean Marais and Jean Moreau, de Funès found it hard to break through. Henri Verlajeux noted, "From one day to the next, Paris discovered him." the industry and the public launched him. It wasn't until 1956, with the role of the merchant Jambier in Claude Autant-Lara's The Trip Across Paris, that he gained critical recognition. Though his screen time was brief, his portrayal of a cowardly yet comically defiant character left a lasting impression. This role foreshadowed the characters that would define his success: ordinary men caught in absurd situations, reacting with burlesque anger. In 1957, de Funès landed his first leading role in Like a Hare in the Soup, winning the Grand Prix du Rire. The film's success, along with Neither Seen Nor Known in 1958, where he played a cunning poacher named Blaireau, marked a turning point. France Dimanche, a popular weekly, dubbed him France's funniest actor. Yet, despite this momentum, his career hit a brief plateau, and he returned to lesser roles. His partnership with Gérard Houry was legendary. In The Sucker, 1965, he formed a hilarious duo with Bourvil with his character Léopold Saroyan, an unlucky crook, leading to iconic scenes like the destruction of a 2CV. The Big Vacation, 1966, also with Bourvil, became the most watched French film until Titanic, with 17.27 million viewers. The story of two Parisians helping British airmen during the occupation mixed humor and emotion, with unforgettable lines like, "Tea for two." After Bourvil's tragic death from cancer in 1970, de Funès collaborated with Yves Montand in The Mad Adventures of Rabbi Jacob, 1971, a parody of Ruy Blas where he played Don Sallust, a greedy and tyrannical minister, with extravagant costumes and scenes of burlesque madness. The Adventures of Rabbi Jacob, 1973, was another triumph, tackling racism and intolerance with humor. De Funès played Victor Pivert, a racist industrialist who disguises himself as a rabbi to escape assassins, leading to iconic scenes like the Hasidic dance. The film's release during the Yom Kippur War created a tense atmosphere, and de Funès received threats and police protection. Other successes included The Wing or the Thigh, 1976, with Coluche, a satire on fast food where de Funès plays a food critic battling the agro-industry, Hibernatus, 1969, with his son Olivier, a comedy about a man frozen since 1905, and Joe, 1971, a Broadway adaptation with comedic twists. After years of struggle, his persistence paid off. By 1967, he was a box office star, even purchasing the Château de Clermont in Loire-Atlantique as a retreat from fame. This 17th-century castle, surrounded by gardens he tended himself, became his haven. Louis de Funès' journey from obscurity to stardom underscores his unwavering dedication, transforming his early minor roles into a lasting comedic legacy. But behind this glory, Louis de Funès was not so funny in real life. His private life was marked by contradictions and complex relationships. He married his first wife, Germaine Louise Elodie Caroyer, on April 27, 1936, in Saint-Étienne. They had a son, Daniel Charles Louis, born in 1937. However, the couple separated in August 1939 after just 3 years, with the divorce finalized on November 13, 1942. After the separation, Louis pursued his acting dream while Germaine raised Daniel alone. Daniel's relationship with his father was complex. Louis lived nearby and occasionally visited in secret, introducing him to jazz and showcasing his piano and dance skills. Yet, Daniel felt his father's absence. In 2011, in his book Louis de Funès, The Oscar of Cinema, Daniel reflected, "Louis came to see me to introduce me to jazz, but I felt his absence. In 1983, I learned of his death on the radio and felt hurt not to have been informed or invited to the funeral." Daniel added, "Louis left me nothing, but that's okay, I still managed to live the life I wanted." Daniel became a sound engineer and lived until 2017. In contrast, Louis's relationship with his other 2 sons, Patrick and Olivier, was closer, though marked by his authoritarianism. He married Jean-Augustine Barthélemy on April 20, 1943, a union that lasted until his death. Jean, a distant niece of Guy de Maupassant, was a discreet but influential figure. They lived in a small apartment, and their first son, Patrick, was born on January 27, 1944, followed by Olivier on August 11, 1949. Patrick became a radiologist, while Olivier acted before becoming an Air France pilot. In their book Don't Talk Too Much About Me, Kids, Patrick and Olivier describe their father as authoritarian but present. He was annoying, he got involved in everything. Louis encouraged Olivier's budding acting career, casting him in films like Fantomas Unleashed, 1965, The Big Vacation, 1967, The Grand Restaurant, 1966, The One-Man Band, 1970, and Hibernatus, 1969. However, Olivier eventually chose aviation, tired of show business. Despite his conservative political views, he notably disdained left-wing figures like Yves Montand. Louis maintained friendships in the industry, particularly with Bourvil, whom he deeply admired. Jean played a significant role in his career. She advised him on film choices, negotiated his fees, and even appeared as his wife in We'll Go to Deauville, 1962. However, she faced challenges. During the filming of The Big Vacation, Bourvil intervened to keep her off the set, finding her presence intrusive. Rumors persist about an affair between Louis and Macha Berenger during the last 13 years of his life, though this remains unconfirmed. Biographer Jean-Marc Loubière noted that, while adored by the public, Louis was shy, frugal, and not particularly sociable. After shoots, he preferred retreating to his garden over joining colleagues for celebrations. This behavior sometimes earned him disdain in the industry, where he was labeled stingy or authoritarian. He was known for his tyrannical perfectionism on set, demanding endless retakes, which exhausted his co-stars. Michel Galabru, his partner in the Gendarme series, confided, "Louis was a genius, but he could be tough. Yet, his humor bonded us like brothers." This complex blend of personal and professional struggles shaped the man behind the laughter, revealing the challenges he faced while entertaining millions. Louis de Funès' fragile health marked a gradual decline in his career. The Mad Adventures of Rabbi Jacob, 1971, was originally set to star de Funès and Bourvil, but after Bourvil's tragic death from cancer in 1970, Gérard Houry rewrote the script with Yves Montand. The shoot was tense, but de Funès and Montand collaborated on improvised comedic moments. After the film, de Funès took a year-long break, declaring he'd only work with trusted directors. Despite the success, he faced personal struggles. Returning to theater in 1971 with Oscar, he was a superstar, but the pressure was immense. The play was a hit, but constant improvisation and high expectations began to weigh on him. In 1973, The Adventures of Rabbi Jacob was a box office triumph, but its release coincided with the Yom Kippur War, creating a tense atmosphere. De Funès received threats and police protection. Returning to theater in The Waltz of the Toreadors under Jean Anouilh's direction, he struggled with the rehearsal process, particularly Anouilh's distant approach. He felt overwhelmed by long lines and confessed to growing anxiety. Despite the challenges, the play succeeded, but his health worsened. During the 200th performance, he suffered severe fatigue and hypertension, signaling a potential heart attack. De Funès stopped performing, stating, "This immense fatigue is a warning bell. We must heed its wisdom." In 1974, eager to work on The Crocodile, a satire on dictatorships he wanted to direct himself, he chose to rest and prioritize his health, realizing the importance of balance after years of intense work. But alarming heart symptoms persisted. During the production of The Waltz of the Toreadors, insurance companies, worried about potential financial losses, demanded thorough medical exams. A cardiologist cleared him but gave him his personal number for emergencies. Tragically, on March 21, 1975, de Funès suffered a first heart attack in his Paris apartment and was rushed to Necker Hospital. Stabilized, doctors advised prolonged rest. Just 9 days later, he lost consciousness during a conversation with Jean and suffered a second, more severe heart attack. Barely saved, the experience was harrowing. His doctors imposed a strict diet, no salt, no fat, and strongly recommended he stop acting to avoid stress. Surprisingly, de Funès initially accepted this advice without hesitation. The postponement of The Crocodile left producer Christian Fechner facing millions in losses, though the script was deemed too demanding. Meanwhile, his friendship with Gérard Houry frayed. despite mutual interest in future collaborations. After 2 months of hospitalization, de Funès returned to his chateau to recover, finding solace in gardening and quiet walks. Ironically, the heart attacks eased his anxiety. 1 second before the ambulance, I was stressed about box office receipts, revenues, and then I suddenly found myself turning the page. Despite this newfound freedom, he longed to return to comedy. By late 1975, he attended theater premieres but felt depressed about missing performing. Determined, he accepted a role in The Wing or the Thigh, 1976, struggling with his health limitations. He resumed his career at a slower pace, with films like The Zizanie, 1978, with Annie Hirarthot, a comedy about marital quarrels, and The Gendarme and the Extraterrestrials, 1979, where he faced aliens with kitschy but hilarious special effects. Medical staff were present on set to monitor his heart. These health struggles changed his comedic approach. He could no longer embody the aggressive, hyperactive characters of his earlier work. In his final years, de Funès pursued ambitious projects, like the 1980 adaptation of Molière's The Miser, which he co-directed with Jean Girault. Despite mixed reviews, critics felt he modernized the text too much. The film reflected his desire to blend classical theater with popular cinema. However, its underperformance at the box office led him to reconsider similar initiatives. In February 1980, he received an honorary César for his career, a belated recognition for an actor who starred in over 140 films without ever winning a major award before. Soon, new health challenges forced him to gradually withdraw. His final works, like The Gendarme and the Gendarmettes, 1982, were marked by physical fatigue and repetitive roles. De Funès confided to close friends his weariness. "I can't run like before, and these gendarmes are starting to weigh on me." Yet he remained active until the end. The painful final chapter came after The Gendarme and the Gendarmettes. New projects awaited Louis de Funès, though his career was overshadowed by health issues. During filming in May 1982, he expressed a desire to reprise his role in Oscar for 100 performances before year's end. He also dreamed of adapting Léon Daudet's novel Morticole, hoping to have Georges Lautner or Robert Hossein direct. While working on the post-synchronization of the sixth Gendarme film, he met Gérard Houry, sparking discussions about reviving The Crocodile. Other potential projects included collaborations with Patrice Leconte, a new film with Coluche, and even one with singer Chantal Goya. Just 3 weeks before his death, de Funès went to Paris to attend the play Papy Fête de la Résistance by Christian Clavier and Martin Lamotte at the Theatre du Splendid. Producer Christian Fechner hoped to create a film with him and Coluche, aiming to replicate the success of The Wing or The Thigh. De Funès enjoyed the play and bonded with the young cast, showcasing his comedic talent by performing his version of Marshal Ludwig von Apfelstrudel in just 3 minutes. Fechner described him as in top form and incredibly funny, noting how the admiration of younger generations revitalized him. Though he accepted the project, he requested a smaller role to ease the strain on his heart. In January 1983, after the holidays, de Funès went to the mountains with his family but struggled with the altitude and returned quickly to Lucellier. On the evening of January 27th, he went to bed feeling extremely tired. Tragically, he suffered a massive heart attack and was rushed to Nantes University Hospital, where he passed away at 8:30 p.m., aged 68. Newspapers like Le Parisien Libre and Presse Ocean quickly published front-page articles, likely informed by hospital staff. His death sparked national mourning. The media treated it as a major tragedy, with headlines like, "France loses its king of laughter." His widow Jean and their children received no immediate visitors, while gendarmes guarded their home to protect their privacy. Michel Galabru, during a live broadcast from Rennes, emotionally referred to de Funès as a brother. "He was like a brother to me." His humor and popularity were universal. Tributes poured in from various figures: former President Valéry Giscard d'Estaing, Culture Minister Jack Lang, who noted that the best tribute to de Funès would be the countless individuals he will continue to entertain posthumously. Prime Minister Pierre Marois, and even the French Communist Party expressed condolences. Despite plans for a private funeral, over 3,000 people attended the ceremony at St. Martin Church in Le Cellier, overwhelming the small village. Few celebrities were present, but colleagues like Galabru, Jean Carmit, producers, and friends attended. He was buried in Le Cellier Cemetery, his grave facing his chateau's garden, as he had wished. A commemorative plaque was installed, and his chateau became a museum in 2016, preserving his legacy.